If you guys have been watching the channel, then you know I am an avid Boba Green player. I've been playing Boba Green since early on in set 1, and I decided that was going to be my deck, and I just went through all of set 1 playing it, and even now in set 2, it's really the only thing I'm interested in playing. So today, I wanted to kind of go through my thought process on building out this deck with all the new set 2 stuff, and explain why I think it is still an amazing deck. And honestly, I'm surprised that nobody's kind of stuck with it. I think most people who are playing Boba just decided to switch to Boba Yellow for whatever reason, and I don't think that's necessarily the right answer here. I think Boba Green is still amazing. I think he's still strong, and yeah, here's my deck building process so far throughout set 2. So the first thing I started to do was just play with cards that I was excited about playing with. All the set 2 cards that I was excited about, I made a video about it. You can go check that out. All the cards I was excited about, I just started jamming them in the deck, different places. Some cards I was surprised that I didn't end up liking. Some cards I was surprised that I ended up liking better than the cards I anticipated liking, right? And I just started trying a bunch of stuff. And this is kind of the list that I started with. I started with my set 1 list, the things I did successful in set 1, and I just kind of jammed in some things I thought were good for set 2 into the list to try to make that same game plan work. If you notice from set 1, I still have the attack pattern Delta, which I loved. Obviously, things like Barrage, Fire Spray, Vader, 7th Fleet, Boba, these are all things that I think are kind of the core of the Boba deck and aren't going to leave from set 1. I quickly found that attack pattern Delta probably should be the first set 1 card that I cut. Unfortunately, it just wasn't working out the same way that it was in set 1. I think it was mostly to fight control, and it doesn't really affect the game in the same way. It doesn't have the same impact that it did. I think there are just, faster decks, faster things to be doing, more efficient things to be doing than dropping an attack pattern Delta. I think it's just too slow now, unfortunately. Some other things that I tried, if you look at the sideboard here, this wasn't really my sideboard. This is just a list of cards I wanted to try. TIE Phantom, incredible. I think that's an amazing card, and I'm very stoked that it ended up working really well. Reputable Hunter, I thought would be an interesting inclusion because I had things like Bounty Hunter's Query and Price on Your Head, both of which I was really excited for. I was really excited for these bounties, but the whole idea of attaching this to an enemy unit and then having to deal with that unit after attaching the bounty, it just didn't feel right. It felt slow. I think bounties are really good in a control type of game plan where you don't really mind losing that action economy early on in the game because you could just, drop things to deal with units and get the value from those bounties. Whereas in something like my game plan, it doesn't really work the same and it just feels too slow. So Reputable Hunter obviously was out because the bounties were coming out. I kind of stopped messing with bounties. Dr. Evazan is another one that kind of failed. I think he seems really, really good. I think there is a place for him somewhere, but I found that if my opponent was able to manipulate him properly and get the untap of their 12 resources, that just lost the game for me. Like, if they were able to kill Dr. Evazan at the right time, in that right moment, they just completely flipped the game and would win. And even when I'm playing against Dr. Evazan, I'm like, ooh, yes, there's going to be one turn that I just explode and I kill Dr. Evazan and just untap all my resources and I get a really crazy turn, pop off and win. So I kind of stopped liking him as well. He was a card I was initially excited about, but I quickly found that there were problems with him. If you look at the main board, a couple of the turn 1 drops that I was excited about were Bazine, Cloud Rider, and Salacious Crumb. These are kind of the main cards from set 2 that I threw in here. Bazine, very good card. But Similarly to Crumb, she's a 1/3, not a very strong 1-drop, not a very strong body on the board. She has a really good effect, but I found that not having a really solid turn 1 play, something like Greedo, to have that 3 power is very important against aggro. So Salacious Crumb had the same problem. I didn't end up really caring about the heal that much. I didn't really care about the ping that much. Like, there were times where it worked out really well, but just the amount of actions you have to take just to get a ping, just to heal one, it kind of slowed things down. And then the 1/3 body, of course, just like the Zine, wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to push the plan that I'm trying to push, right? I'm trying to be fast, aggressive, keep my opponent on the back foot, and then really just blow up on my Boba turn and the couple turns after to finish the game, right? And Salacious Crumb didn't really do that for me. Ultimately, trying to mash all these different things together, all these cards I might be excited about individually, putting them all together, it just made things really convoluted, and I started to lose sight of what my actual game plan was, what my actual strategy for the deck was, and it just was very, very unsuccessful. So that brings me to kind of the foundation of my set 2 deck, is this idea of just keeping it simple. I titled this Keep It Simple just so I can go back to this every time, and I know this is like a pretty solid game plan. So this is kind of where the rest of my list kind of branch from, is this like keep it simple type of deck. I cut down on events. I got rid of Bosk in favor of things like Forlom and Zuckuss, which 2 of my favorite cards in set 2 now. I love these guys, especially Zuckuss. He's just a freaking monster, dude. Saboteur, 6/6 for 5. He's a great ECL target on my Boba turn. And Saboteur is just so good. It works so well. Defeat shields, hit past sentinels, like, oh my. It works so well. Now, I really liked the idea of just having a mostly unit list. There's so many units here. I'm barely running any events, barely any upgrades. So I started to really favor that game plan. You notice I've got 2 Vaders, 2 Mauls. I really like this split. I ended up kind of keeping this all the way through where I am now. 2 Vaders, 2 Mauls. You get best of both worlds. Whichever one you need, you just resource the other one, like depending on the matchup. It's very matchup dependent which one you want. Whether you want to push to finish them off with Maul, or you actually need to go a little bit wider. So a couple of the key takeaways from this, I really like the unit heavy nature of the deck, but I ended up finding that things like McClunky kind of were a tempo loss in the deck, right? The whole idea of the deck is to just slam units on the board, really apply a ton of pressure. McClunky kind of takes away from that strategy. Even though it deals 3 damage and I might be able to kill a unit on the other side, I'm bouncing one of my own units back, which is something I don't necessarily want to happen. I want to keep my units on the board. I want them to just keep attacking. I don't really want to take them away from the board. It's good with things like Salacious and Bazine, but because of their problems that I talked about earlier, McClunky just didn't fit as well. I know, like, I was really excited about the McClunky Fire Spray combo, where you could play McClunky, bounce Fire Spray back to your hand, play it again readied, and do a whole bunch of crazy nonsense. But that didn't really come up very often. McClunky was definitely something that you want to use in the first couple turns. Otherwise, you're not going to get much value from it later, other than being able to have that recursion with Fire Spray. Another card that I'm surprised that I started to step away from is Boba Fett's Armor. Boba Fett's Armor, when it first came out, everybody was flipping out about this card. Everybody thought it was going to be a huge problem, which it definitely is. If you throw this on your leader, you can kind of just win the game with him alone. But it doesn't always work out that way. There are answers to it. Not only can you defeat Boba's Armor with something like Poe, and still end up just one-shotting Boba leader. Rivals Fall is also a problem. Power of the Dark Side's also a problem. There's definitely a lot of ways to deal with it, and I feel like that 2 extra damage that I'm pushing out doesn't really outweigh how slow and clunky it ended up feeling. And I mentioned Poe because around this point, Sabine ECL was probably my worst matchup. Typically, Boba Green in set 1 was incredible against Sabine, and you could just stop her with a barrage, or stop her by ramping, or just, ECL turn 2 with your 7th fleet or your Boba Fett, and just, you basically win the game if you make that sort of move. But set 2, Sabine has Poe and Wrecker now, and these guys are exactly the top end that she needed to just really finish out a grindy game. And I didn't even mention Darksaber. Darksaber's another freaking issue. These 3 cards really make Sabine Green a problem for this deck. That's kind of how I got into a list like this. This was kind of an updated version of that keep it simple type of game plan. I was like, okay, I really need to focus on what can stop Sabine. I kept in battalions. I liked them as an ECL target. I put in Viper Probe Droid for that nice 3 power turn 1 play. That's just huge against aggro. And I put in things like No Good to Be Dead and Phase 3 Dark Trooper. Now, Phase 3's Dark Trooper is specifically to stop Sabine with the Darksaber. This is something I want to play on the Sabine turn or the turn before to just slow her down. I quickly realized that Phase 3 Dark Trooper was simply a speed bump that Sabine can just fly past, and it didn't work the way that I wanted it to. So another iteration, I kept the Dark Troopers in, but I put some upgrades in that could help my smaller units one-shot Sabine before she gets the Darksaber. That was kind of my whole deal, is like, I just want to send out a blaster using Smuggle to one-shot Sabine before they can attach the Darksaber to her. And this seemed like it would work really well, but I wasn't really built the proper way to do it. I took out Forlom and Zuckuss for some reason, and I just ended up having the same problems. Dark Trooper wasn't working the way I wanted it to. Jetpack wasn't working the way I wanted it to. Smuggling for 4 seems like quite a bit, and it really is. I'm still having problems against aggro. So then I got rid of the upgrades. I was like, they're not working. Get them out of here. I kept the Dark Trooper in. I really tried to make Dark Trooper work. Put the Bazines back in to snipe out Darksabers or Poes or Wreckers. And I still was just really trying to fix my Sabine game. So I even put in Salacious Crumb for the healing. It's like, that's my answer. I just got to heal. And it worked some games. And I was like, oh, Salacious Crumb's the best because I had 24 HP and I beat a Sabine because I dropped a Crumb a couple times. That means he won me the game. But I found that that wasn't really the case. And I missed Forlom and Zuckuss. They're really just a big help. So I put them back in. And my buddy was working on kind of a Toro Grand Inquisitor deck, and he was running green, and his whole plan was like, okay, I'm going to untap Toro, untap him with Grand Inquisitor, untap him with the Bounty Hunter, and just hit with him a bunch. And he was playing some upgrades, and he was playing Moment of Glory, okay? And as soon as I saw Moment of Glory, I was like, dude, I have to try this. It reminds me of Attack Pattern Delta, which is like my love from set 1, and I really wanted to jam it in. So I started to make a kind of Boba Toro list. I went back to my Keep It Simple list. You know, the Forlom, the Zuckuss, obviously the Barrages, obviously the Fire Sprays, 2 Vaders, 2 Mauls, kind of my base game plan. All my 1-drops, Greedos, Smugglers, Spacers, Cloud Riders. And then Toro with the Blaster and the Jetpack. as upgrades that I can attach to them and would work really well to attach to them, swing, play a bounty hunter, which I'm running a bunch of bounty hunters, untap him, swing again, right? The idea is to buff him a bunch, even be able to play like a moment of glory on him and really just seal the deal. So this made the deck a lot faster. And I was finding that I really, really enjoyed having the option of Toro. Having that combo aside everything else just works really, really well. This is where I started really, really loving Hot Shot Blasters. Being able to snipe Sabine, I could play a Toro or a Boba Fett turn 2, or have a Greedo, or have a Cloud Rider on the field, and, you know, smuggle out Blaster and kill Sabine instantly. That's helped a lot. It really has. But there's one thing that you might notice is I took out Waylay. And I quickly started to realize how big of a problem that was. I need Waylay. There are a lot of upgrades. Darksaber could go on a Battlefield Marine, and I want to Waylay him. So the next iteration was basically the same thing, but I put in Waylays, and Waylays will never leave again. I need those so bad. Now, in this iteration, I found that even against Sabine, it's still not enough. I still lose in space. If an aggro deck, Ray Red, Sabine Green, even Han, New Han, if they get into space really early, they can just win. A-Wings are devastating. Still, A-Wing into Wing Leader is still one of the best early plays you can make, and I still need to account for it. So I put in one of my favorite cards from set 2, Mercenary Gunship. I love Mercenary Gunship. I threw in 3 of them, and they've worked incredible ever since. Okay? Now, this is kind of my most recent list. And I say kind of because there's still a couple more tweaks we got to talk about. But, you know, having the Toro combo, having the blasters, having the Mercenary Gunship, these are all incredible additions. Moment of Glory is still sick. I really like when it works. This list I haven't lost yet in person, at in-person events. I'm 13-0 in-person events with this list. Even being 13-0 with this list, I can still think of some problems. My sideboard, mostly, I think. My sideboard is the next thing to change. It is heavily catered towards control. Okay? With the Emperor's Legion and the Choose Sides. I love Choose Sides, but it hasn't really worked the way I want it to. I think it's really good against control. I could just take an Avenger or something and give them a Crafty Smuggler. But I think there are better things to cater towards in the sideboard, like putting in some stuff for aggro. I am interested in trying Relentless Pursuit and Discerning Veteran. Getting that capture against aggro, I think will work really well. I haven't tried it a whole bunch, but when I have tried it, it's worked out pretty decently. It really just turns the game, and I can just race Sabine at that point. After I capture, boom, now we're just racing, and I have a huge advantage. I really like this list and the way it feels, but we'll see. So that's kind of my whole thought process behind building into this. These are the steps I took to build to this. It's far from done. I'm going to keep building as I prepare for the planetary qualifier coming up that I'm going to in San Francisco. I really want to prepare for the store showdowns. There's still a lot of work to be done, still a lot of reps to be had. So keep coming back, keep checking out these streams. I'm going to be, you know, still doing tons of online games, still making videos like this. So I hope this wasn't too rambly. I just wanted to, you know, vomit my thoughts out into a video of like my process to getting to this point. Yeah, if you want to